Welcome to this morning's webinar, Zero Trust Deployment with Microsoft Azure from Informator. My name is Sasha, and I'm a security MVP as well as an Azure MVP, a Microsoft Regional Director, and security researcher, as well as the consultant and trainer in the field of cloud and security, cloud security, infrastructure security. And today we are talking about Zero Trust deployment with Microsoft Azure. It's quite a broad area, and depending on what services you have, then this implementation, or I would say deployment, will be a little bit different. But there are, of course, some of the products, some of the features that form the core of the Zero Trust. We won't tell a little bit details why Zero Trust and why to have it, what it is, and what are the principles. We already covered that in the previous webinars. You can look at them in the archive or on the website on the YouTube. But practically, Zero Trust is based on core three principles, and all of the products, not just Microsoft, but other products and different vendors are working together and investigating different signals to make an intelligent decision. And in this core, security policy enforcement is actually at the center of the Zero Trust architecture, and that would be the conditional access policies, hence policy enforcement, continuous policy evaluation, and controlling the enforcement. For example, including multi-factor authentication with conditional access, and that these policies take into account different factors. One of most important ones is user account risk. So the risk tied to a specific user account, then a risk that can be lower or higher based on the specific user sign-in attempt. Then the device risk and other criteria and policies that you set. So entities that include identities, devices, or actually endpoints, all the data application network and other infrastructure component actually should be configured with appropriate security. And the policies that we describe here, that we set up, are actually configured for each of these components and coordinated with the overall Zero Trust strategy. For example, we have here the core Zero Trust policy enforcement, and of course, which is tied to a threat protection. But then continuous assessment actually assesses all the components, network data, applications, infrastructure, endpoints, identities, and so on. One very high-level overview architecture would be like this one, where, of course, depending on how what products do you have, and what kind of features do you have installed, what license do you have, this might be a little bit different. But there are some core products actually that form Zero Trust. And in this case, let's go a little bit back in the slide. The policies are here, but not just the policies, but also individual components that has to conform to the three pillars of the Zero Trust. So verify explicitly, always verify, and like 100 years old premise that we should allow only enough permissions so that the users are able to do their job. So just enough administration. And here we tie a little bit of other things like just enough administration and so on. But the base of everything should be, and actually it is, because you can't go without the identity. So a cloud identity infrastructure. Here is the Entra ID, former Azure Active Directory, now Entra ID. And then on top of that, then we have other products that some companies might have or might not have, depending of course, of the size of the company, the licenses, budgets, and everything. There are four here: Microsoft Sentinel, Defender for Endpoint, Identity, and Enter-ID Identity Protection. But there are others as well. Defender for Office 365, for example, and so on. So not everyone might have the need or license for Defender for Identity, for example. But Defender for Office 365 and other products, Defender for Cloud Apps, are definitely should be put in this light blue tier. And then on top of that, then you send once you have a solid foundation, an identity foundation, and protected. Once you have solidly protected your identities, then you can build up on top of that with the hub VNets, for example. They are traditional ones, or maybe you have a need for virtual WAN, for example. Then on top or on the side of it, you have the storage. Here on the left, on the workload tier, then you have IaaS apps in Amazon Web Services, and this is just a sample. There can be PaaS services in Amazon AWS, actually AWS or Google Cloud Platform, or for example, some third or your own Azure tenant, for example, that can be connected via Azure Lighthouse, and so on. And again, on-premises workloads connected via Azure Arc. Whatever these are, then we have to protect them accordingly. So there are, of course, we've taken one reference architecture, which comprises of on-premises location, internet, Azure, on-premises eventual data center. Not everyone might have that, but we are focusing on Azure here. There are multiple infrastructure as a service components. This is a focused Azure component. Multiple IaaS components are there. We have a three-tier application, PaaS services that support IaaS application storage, and so on. These multiple IaaS components and elements include different types of users, IT consumers that might be taking advantage or accessing the applications that we've developed, that we distributed from different sites, from internet, from on-premises, from branch offices, and so on. So, or internally, etc. Then this is a common three-tier application, for example, or architecture that contains a front tier, that contains an application tier, and that contains data tier as well. So this is just one simple one. Of course, there are so many more complicated architectures and so many simple ones. But this is just one sample that actually that actually has a purpose to give you an overview what you should focus on, for example, and take what applies to you. Most of the used platform as a services here in Azure are the ones that support these infrastructure as a service applications, for example, and then also the Microsoft Enter-ID directory roles, as well as the role-based access controls should be placed here. All of the things we do actually contribute to the zero trust security approach, because these products are in fact all of them are developed, created, manufactured around the zero trust principle. So they are able to take advantage of zero trust principle. So, because of course we have a core of that is the conditional access, but there are some other tools that we can involve in achieving zero trust strategy, because zero trust is not a product, is a philosophy, is a strategy. For example, one of the pillars we mentioned is just enough administration. For example, one of the first things that we should do that would be also that would represent the core of the just enough administration. It would be the role-based access controls and Entra-ID directory controls. So using and utilizing ones that are the most restrictive, but the ones that actually allow people to do their jobs, is a correct way to do zero trust, because we are implementing the principle of least privilege. We can then, of course, enhance these three principles and with other things as well. For example, if we implement always verify, never trust anyone, then we can pair these these role-based access controls and intra-ID directory controls with privileged identity management. For example, if we have intra-ID privileged identity management, of course, if we have intra-ID P2 license. But if we don't have, then of course, no harm with that. We can always buy a license or two, or even not buy one. But the point is that we know what kind of products, which products we should put in which basket. And here, for example, also we have storage blobs and storage files as a tier that provides object storage for the apps, and files that we shared by users is also used in here. So, for example, in designated by number one. This is just one sample. So there are many components of that. So if we took the contained approach, this picture actually, this diagram actually shows how the Azure infrastructure is organized within a single Microsoft Entra tenant. The different parts of the diagram actually are explained in the following topics. For example, we have Azure subscriptions. You can spread the resources across more than one subscription, where each subscription can have different roles, such as network subscription, security subscription, and so on. This is also explained very well in the Cloud Adoption Framework, where in landing zone documentation, and the webinar that we actually one of the webinars that we had recently. So, the different subscription can also have different environments, such as a production, development, test environment. And this is also the segmenting actually is also a good principle of zero trust. So it depends on how you want to separate your environment and the number of resources you will have in each. You will then use different management groups to manage one or more subscriptions together. This will let you apply permissions with role-based access controls and Azure policies to a group of subscriptions instead of setting up each subscription separately, for example. And then apply and utilize Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Azure Monitor. Let's say each Azure subscription has a set of Azure Monitor solutions and Defender for Cloud solutions available, and tiers as well. We have Defender for Cloud for servers and P1 and P2 and tiers, and many other granular tiers. If you use management group, for example, to manage these subscriptions, you will able to see all the functionality of Azure Monitor and Defender for Cloud in one portal. For example, Secure Score, which is provided by Defender for Cloud, will be combined for all the subscriptions. And then we have the storage resource group. So the storage account should be, for example, in this example, is in a separate resource group. Then you can separate each storage account in a different resource group for more detailed permission control. And Azure Storage Services are also in a separate one. You can have one storage account for each kind of storage workload. For example, object storage and Azure Files. This gives more detailed access control and can increase performance as well. And then we have also virtual machines resource groups. So these VMs are in one resource group. You can also put each virtual machine type for workload tiers, for example, like front-end application and data in different resource groups to further separate access controls, which is also one principle of zero trust as well. And then if you have spoken Hub VNet resource groups in different subscriptions, then these network and other resources for each of these virtual networks are going to be in the separate resource group for spoken hubs VNets, for example. This is working well and good when different teams are responsible for these. But another option is to arrange these components by putting all resources in one group and security resources in another. So it depends on how your organization is set up to manage these resources, for example. And then let's focus a little bit on different tiers and how we can apply zero trust principles to different things. For example, for a storage, then for virtual networks, then for spoke networks in Azure. So zero trust principle to Azure storage would be one of the principles that will apply to Azure storage will be to protect data in all three modes. So the data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. So the data encryption in transit can be enabled by using transport level security between Azure and the clients. Here we should set up the options to always use HTTP communication over the public internet. And then also we can also, for example, if you use the REST APIs to access these objects, then we can enforce the use of HTTPS. So there's an option in Azure Storage that is called Secure Transfer Required, and then we can set up this thing. One thing will be also to prevent anonymous read access or public access. We can also by default there's a public block. By default, the public access to a blob is not allowed, but actually we can prevent further data breaches or eventual data breaches, or reduce the possibility to have a breach from anonymous to restrict anonymous access. So we should always specify who has the access to the data. Then we can also enforce a minimum required version of TLS. For example, we know that there are multiple versions of TLS, 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. We should always stick to the latest one. Not every company is very agile in these things, so they are using TLS 1.0, for example, or recent ones. Although not a very big deal, of course, but remember, if you don't take care of this, then the eventual attackers will find the loophole, and the attackers usually use the principle of the least effort. So they will find some deficiencies in your systems. And actually, when we define operations, for example, to our storages, to our storage types, then we should also restrict define the scope of operations as well. You can always use different types of encryption types, whether it's Microsoft managed key or customer managed key. Then we have a possibility to use infrastructure encryption, which is optional double encryption at service level and at the infrastructure level. Then what we have also the possibility, we need to specify or actually verify that users and control that users have right control access to the storage data with least privileges. So within the identity and access management controls, or RBAC controls, we should check access regularly and enforce HTTPS, configure the SAS keys, SAS expiration policies, and actually validate these permissions, whether they are okay or not. And then use the user delegation with SAS whenever possible. Of course, we need to also logically separate and segregate the critical data with network controls, of course. We can always use the private endpoints for that. And of course, the private networks or private endpoints can be further restricted with different settings. And then we can also use the Defender for Storage for eventual automated threat detection and protection. Here, Defender for Storage actually can detect a lot of anomalous access patterns, such as, for example, data exfiltration, or for example, suspicious storage activities and anomalous access, anonymous access, and so on. So this is something that is collected and figured out by Azure, by Defender for Storage, and it is of course based on our baseline. So it is tailored specifically to our workloads and how our users are working with this. So these are not thresholds that are that are global, but are tailored to each and every customer. Then we have zero trust principles that we can also very basically apply to virtual machines in Azure. And that means we can, of course, configure logical isolations for these virtual machines. That means separate these VMs in different groups, and then use the role-based access controls, leverage the potential, the power of the RBACs actually to determine who has access to that and to these VMs. And eventually, if you have privileged identity management, the Azure resource access and group access can also be managed by privileged identity management as well, not just Entra ID directory access roles can't be assigned, but you can use also RBAC roles and group roles too. One very good thing, which is often neglected, would be to use the secure virtual machines. The secure virtual machines cannot be have to be selected during the creation of the VMs. You can't switch to the secure trusted virtual machine once the VM is created. When you create the virtual machine, just make sure that you select the trusted virtual machine, which will allow you to enable a secure boot. It will enable the use of the virtual trusted platform module, and also it will enable you to use the integrity monitoring. So that's extremely important, because today you have boot malware, you have firmware malware, you have very low level attacks and malware that can exploit your VMs. So don't think that you are too small, because no one is too small for the attackers. We are not handpicked by attackers, of course, but we are picked by automated scans by machines and programs that don't care whether we are 100,000 plus employees company, or if we are 25 employees, just a startup. So anyone can become a target. And then this thinking usually also leads to big problems. So customer managed keys and double encryption is also probably for some companies an overkill, meaning they don't have such sensitive data, or it requires an additional management layer or additional burden, but still not so much, because enabling server-side encryption or Azure Disk Storage actually will give you FIPS compliant encryption with AES-256 encryption capabilities. Also, hardware security module or software-defined encryption capabilities too. So these things should be taken into account as well. And what we have to do again is also control the applications that are installed on virtual machines. What this means, it means we have, in fact, possibility to focus on which browser extensions are actually we are using, and not use the ones that we don't need to use. In fact, securing maintenance of virtual machines would be configuring securing access, and that would be setting up of course multi-factor authentication to access virtual machines. Or we can also, during the creation of a virtual machine, especially, it's very convenient, use the managed identity within the virtual machines, and use the Entra ID logon capabilities. So instead of using local accounts, then we transfer that burden to the Entra ID and use accounts that are in there. Of course, we have to have the latest Windows servers, and from 2019 towards newer, and Windows 10, 11 to do that. But it's possible for additional security, of course. And of course, these can be secure communication with these machines can be also set up with the MFA. Advanced threat detection and protection, of course, whatever you use, whether it's Defender for Cloud or something else or endpoint, then this should be used as well. And as a very nice addition, if you use Defender for Cloud Plan 1 or 2, you will also get Defender for Endpoint Plan as well. So, and vulnerability management, for example. So you're not just paying for the Defender for Cloud Plan Service Plan 1 or 2, you're also getting the Defender for Endpoint license, and plus your additional licenses, for example, like vulnerability management, which is nice addition, because it is usually these add-ons or additional licenses can get quite costly. But since you have already one for the Defender for Cloud, it's very convenient that you don't double your licenses for endpoint protection. What else? Spoke and Hub VNets in Azure. The Spoke and Hub VNets in Azure can also be set up according to Zero Trust principles, and that will be using RBAC, Entra, Azure Active Directory, actually Entra, RBAC, or custom roles. For the most companies, the built-in roles are quite okay. But I suggest, if you have the possibility or knowledge or power or manpower, actually personnel power to do so, then you can further restrict these controls to suit your needs, and that will be the best approach. So tighten up security to align with a zero trust, just enough administration, and go accordingly. So these Entra RBAC or directory or custom roles should be implemented whenever possible. Isolating infrastructure into your own resource group should be also a part of the zero trust. So, for example, isolating network resources for the storage resources, for the data, for the compute, and so others. Segmenting actually will decrease the likelihood of you're narrowing the attack surface, of course. So if something is if something happens, it will be more likely to be contained in these segmented resources, because you're adding more layers, you are adding more controls, therefore you are ruining the attacker's return on investment. Actually, how? By extending the time that they have to, in knowledge and time, of course, which is in turn connected, to get to the resources that they need to get to. And that also, since it takes time, and it ruins their monetary plan, but also increases the chances for someone to get noticed, and actually increases the knowledge that they need to have in order to break all these layer defenses. So the security is not one big switch, but it's in fact the detailed it's in the details. So it's in a separate individual segmented detailed security settings that we configure on every product that we have. And then creating application security group for each virtual machine role, for example, could be additional, also a very nice security outline. And for securing traffic and resources within the VNet, it can be done as well. So we can also additionally secure these ports. So whether it's using or actually ports networks, whether it's using network security groups, or we can in fact additionally encrypt the traffic using available resources, which would be, for example, VPN gateways that can be implemented internally as well. Securing traffic and resources within the VNet doesn't mean just network security groups, but also application security groups, and allowing just the ports and the traffic that is allowed to run into it. For example, secret server ports opening 1433 and other ports like 443 should be used, but in just in time, for example, capability, and that is something that Defender for Cloud can allow you as well. There are some scripts that can be used there as well, that users have been developing, but these are not so good, and sometimes these um, acquire also additional burden of higher maintenance cost. So Defender for Cloud actually allows you to have this just in time out of the box that works really, really well. And enable advanced threat detection and protection, which is anything that you can implement to secure these, whether it's most easily is done via Defender for Cloud, of course, but you can use anything you want. And for the last part, we have also Zero Trust principle to have VNet. This doesn't have to be firewall premier or firewall standard. It can be any kind of firewall. This is just an example, since we are talking Microsoft. Then the firewall here is a nice addition, but also it's also preferred edition than the third-party firewalls for a lot of companies, because it requires less management. It reduces the attack surface, because you don't have to worry about additional infrastructure components, like putting the third-party application or firewall onto the separate resource, management of these resources, patching operating systems, taking care of networks where these machines are deployed. So practically, we introduce a lot of moving parts if we don't have managed service, and this a lot of moving parts and third-party tools can be also attack vectors that will lead to decreased security in our in our case. Uh, DDoS protection standard is also something that we should be aware of, but not very. It's not a big deal if you don't employ the DDoS protection standard, because everyone since the beginning of the Azure has had the Azure DDoS protection basic. Only if you have a very sensitive or more very sensitive data or environment or some additional requirements, then you should go and consider the DDoS protection standard. And now the network gateway routing to the firewalls, well, or to some other appliance, for example, should be implemented. For example, this all these actually is contributing to the zero trust principle. The network gateway routing to the firewall, or actually routing to the inspection appliance, or routing to the specific route or on-premises network, and then outside, is also something that is considered to be a good practice, because you're practically controlling where your traffic goes, and in a controlled manner, this traffic can be even better better subjected to better security, better controls. And the threat protection, of course, should be, as always, implemented. You notice that we mentioned the threat protection everywhere, and sincerely think that in the future, this automated CSPM and CWP protections will be a changer and game player. Differentiate. It will be something that will differentiate the companies that have been running for a long time, and the ones that have been breached every now and then. So without some automated, some very high level and high quality threat protection, we won't survive in this future cloud era. So this was the one way to do the zero trust within the Azure. We have seen dozens of principles, and based on the sample architecture, and of course this can be tailored to the usage, to the services, to the products that you have. But basically, it is taking advantage of all the things that you have and tighten up security as much as you can. But also don't be fooled by that. Consider also implementing something else that is missing in your environment, whether this is the tighten RBAC controls or conditional access or additional service that might not be so costly in the first place, but it will greatly increase the security of your environments. So stay secure. Thank you for joining us today. You can always rewatch the webinar. Thanks a lot for attending the webinar, and stay safe and be secure. Thank you a lot, and see you in the next webinar.